In this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you the basics of the steering wheel, live rules, and the relate functionality. To start with, you just want to select the top face and you want to deselect all of the live rules. The reason we're not using suspend is because we're going to be introducing live rules as we go. So the first thing you want to show is just selecting the primary axis of the steering wheel and start dragging to modify the part. You want to point out that you can just click a point out in space for some random value, or you can actually key in an exact amount. So I'm going to move this 12 millimeters. So now I just made that part 12 millimeters taller. Another way to do that is using dimensions. So you want to bring up your smart dimension and you want to pick the rounds, and what it's going to do is find that theoretical intersection of the faces to give you a true height dimension. And what you want to point out here is I can use this dimension to actually change the model just like we did with the steering wheel. But we can key in an exact amount so we have an exact height for our part. So we might want to make this 66 millimeters. The next change that we're going to make is we're going to pull the front face out. Now when I select this front face, you want to point out that down here in the status bar it shows that we have one item selected. As we begin to drag this, you can see that the side angled faces are being extended all the way down to a sharp edge. If we don't want that to happen, we can control that by selection. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to hit the space bar. I'm going to add these two faces. Now again, down in the status it's showing us that we have 3 items are selected. And so now as I start to do this same drag, you can see that I get a different answer. That the 2 angled faces are moving with the select set, and so it's not going to that sharp point. It's actually moving the angled faces, which is what I want to do. Another thing to point out is you see over in the dimensions, or over in the graphics window in the upper right there, it shows a little glyph. And this glyph indicates that some dimension is changing with this move. So I have a PMI dimension to the faces that are moving, and it's changing. And it's just an indicator to the user that something is changing dimensionally. And in this case, again, we're going to key in an exact amount. You're just going to come out 20 millimeters. The next thing you want to do is select the angled face. Now pay attention to where you select the face. Kind of get toward the middle of the face, and that's where it's going to place that steering wheel. You want to get the face on the opposite side, and you can show that the steering wheel appears perpendicular to that selected face, and that you can actually move in a perpendicular fashion to that face at some distance. I'm going to hit escape because really what I really want to show in this case is the rotation. So you select the steering wheel, and as you rotate, you can see it's rotating about the center of the steering wheel. But I really don't have a lot of control over how that thing is rotating. So what I'm going to do is hit the escape key, and I'm going to move the steering wheel to the top edge. And when you do that, you can see now it's rotating about that top edge. You have much more control over how that thing is rotating. In the same way, I can move it to the lower edge, start the rotation again, and control it again by selecting or by moving the steering wheel to the edge. Now I may want to change the angle, so I'm going to type in -2 and show that you can control it actually dimensionally with that angle dimension. And I've changed that, of course, 2 degrees. The next change we're going to make using live rules. So the first thing I want to do is just select this hole. And I'm going to select, before I select, what I'm going to show is, of course, you can move left to right, you can move front to back, you could click on the orange ball, and you can key in some angle that you want to move that hole, or you could go to a key point and move toward that key point. A lot of control there. I'm going to hit escape because what I really want to show is that I can just click on this plane and I can move this thing in plane. So kind of a free-form move. Now notice that only the hole is moving. But let's say my design intent was that this hole is concentric with this outside radius, and I want that to be maintained. I could do it by selection, by selecting this face and selecting that and doing the move, or I could let live rules start to work for me. So I want to come down here and turn on maintain concentric faces and maintain tangent faces. Start the move again, and you can see that it's being maintained now. That it says it sees that those two, the center of the hole and the center of the radius are concentric, So it maintains that for me automatically. The side faces are tipping because they're always going to stay tangent to that radius based on that live rule. But now let's say I'm going to say, well, this is a symmetric part. It was symmetric when I started. I want it to remain symmetric. And notice that I'm always hitting escape before I come down here and change any live rules. And that's so, as I'm moving my cursor down in this direction, it doesn't fail. The part doesn't fail because I'm doing a move that it can't do. So you want to come down here and you want to select symmetry, show this again. So now I'm moving my hole. It's staying concentric, it's staying tangent, but the opposite side is moving as well based on symmetry. My next design intent, well, I had these 3 holes lined up along the y-axis, and I want that to be maintained as well. So you can come down and enable coplanar axis, and now those holes will remain lined up with each other as part of my design intent, that it's going to be maintaining that for me automatically. Notice the side faces are tipping. Well, when I started, everything was nice and square and orthogonal. We have another live rule that we can turn on, asking it to keep orthogonal to base if possible, which means if the face was orthogonal to the base reference planes when I started, try and maintain that unless there's some dimension that's preventing that from moving. So you can see that all is being maintained. And I'm just going to pick a random point in the graphics window. So with that being said, I have all those live rules working for me. That means that I could come in here and I could dimensionally change the width. And notice the 2 outside holes are staying concentric. That live rule is working for me. Likewise, I could change this back face. And you see, because I'm moving the back face, I have the tangency to the outside radius. The holes are staying concentric, and the middle hole is moving because of that coplanar axis. So the next thing I want to show is if I roll the model over, you can see that I have some slots in the bottom. And what I want to do is just pick this end face of the slot and start dragging. Now notice that only that slot is moving. There are 2 other slots that I want to move with it. And what I can do is enable another live rule for coplanar axis, or coplanar faces, I should say. So this is going to maintain any coplanar faces. So these 2 faces are coplanar, which means as I make this move, that live rule kicks in and finds the faces that are coplanar and moves them as well. Of course, the faces on the opposite side are moving because of the symmetry or coplanarness to this original symmetric face. So now everything is behaving. I could click a point graphically for this move. I could key in a dimension, but I also want to show that I could go to a key point. So I'm going to pick up this vertex on the opposite side of the part. And what that means is now that's coplanar with this outside edge. So if I start this move again, you can see it's moving faces on the opposite side. But let's say that I'm zoomed in tight and I'm making this move. How do I know what's moving? Okay, a couple indicators. If you look down in the status, it's telling me that the live rule is adjusting 20 faces. So that's one indication that something is changing. I know that a dimension is changing again because of the glyph that's in the graphics area that's telling me I have some dimension that's being modified by this change. But if I want to see what other faces are being affected, I can click the V on the keyboard, which suspends my move. What that does is allow me to rotate the model around and find all the faces that are being highlighted with this move. That means all those faces are moving as well. So you can see everything that's blue is moving based on this change that we're making in the live rules that are in play. You can see that that dimension, that 76.76 dimension is there. And if I go over and just hover my cursor on that for a second, it comes up and it tells me what the previous value was of that dimension before I started this move. So that's another really handy feature as you're making an edit. So when we're ready, we can just click the V again to start the move again. Now, Notice that all these faces are moving, but let's say the middle slot I didn't want to take part in this. I didn't want coplanar to find the faces on the middle slot. Well, I could stop the move, I could hit escape, and I could individually select the faces that I wanted to move. That's one way to do it by selection. Another way is to take advantage of what we call advanced live rules. If you click the Control E, you can see it brings up this list. Now I'm looking at the top level view, and as I stop my cursor on each one of these planes, you can see that it's highlighting graphically on the screen, okay, in the graphics area. This is the one that I don't want to take part in this move. So I'm going to uncheck coplanar. Okay, so that now is taken out of the equation. Let me just back up here a little bit. I need to find the face that's on the opposite side, which is this bottom one. I also don't want that to move, so I'm going to uncheck that. And now if I accept it, you can see that that middle slot is no longer taking part in this move that we're making. I may move it 10. Or I may want to use the dimension. Now, notice I don't have to do that again because it's no longer coplanar. That middle slot's no longer coplanar, so I don't need to worry about deselecting anything. The next thing I'm going to show, I'm going to turn on a sketch that I have. And you can see the sketch is below that face, so I'm going to select that sketch, and you can see that even with the steering wheel on a sketch, I can move the sketch plane. And I'm going to move it up to the end point so that it's sitting on top of the part. Now notice this sketch is not trimmed. Doesn't matter, because we create regions when the sketch lies on the face. So I can just select these two regions graphically, and as I pull up, it creates a protrusion. As I push it down in, it creates a cut. Now this is an open profile and it's set to close. So I'm going to reset this to open, which means as I pull it down in the part, it creates a cut all the way through the part. And you just want to come down some distance, doesn't really matter. The next key thing before you do the next piece of the demonstration is you need to make sure that this round is inside this upper edge of the angled face. So if you're looking at it from the top, just make sure that you're inside of this edge. Because what you're going to show now is the relate functionality. Because what I want is I want this face to be coplanar with the angled face. So you select the face, go to your relate. The default when you're selecting a plane is coincident plane. Allows you to pick the plane, accept it, and now those are coplanar. Which means I'm going to select this middle face and start moving, and because of my live rule that says keep it coplanar, the other two faces, the angled faces, are moving with it. Now do be careful. You see how it jumped there and failed because I hit a key point. So it's always good to keep your cursor off the part as you're doing a dynamic move so it doesn't pick up key points. The next thing I want to show is actually persisting a relationship. So with that same face selected, I'm going to click the relate and I'm going to do the same thing, only this time I'm going to select the persist option and I'm going to persist it to this back angled face. What that does is actually save that relationship in the model. So it's saying no matter what, those two faces need to stay coincident. That means if I pick this guy again and I start to do the move, okay, coplanar is taking effect. I'm going to hit escape once because I'm going to suspend my live rules. So now no coplanar is found, no symmetry is found, but because of that saved relationship, those two faces always remain coplanar. That's even true during a rotation. So if I rotate that face, you can see that it's always going to stay coplanar no matter what. And so that concludes this demonstration of showing the basics of the steering wheel, the introduction to live rules, and also the relate functionality.